All right, it looks like we are holding pretty steady where we are now in terms of participants. So I will go ahead and let my video loose. My name is Phil Barbash. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Director of Camping for the National Capillary Council. You can see I'm coming to you live tonight from the top of Viewing Rock, where I'm sure everybody here either has been or is excited to get to at some point. It is quite the magnificent scene. Also with us, who's going to be kind of flipping the switches in the background, is Sarah Moses. A lot of you, I'm sure, have had interactions with her at some point, and she's going to be monitoring the question and answer section as I go through a few things on the PowerPoint. So she's going to answer your questions to the best of her ability as I move forward, and we are also going to have a question and answer section at the end. So if you don't get something answered, we'll try to get to it at the end here, keeping in mind and being respectful of everyone's time. Okay, so thank you all for joining us tonight. It looks like we have 145 people here, which is incredible and fantastic news and is a little bit nerve-wracking, but we will push forward. And we are going to be recording this. So we are recording this now, and it will be available and posted on our website for future use as we move forward. So let's get started. All right, so a couple of prerequisites that I did want to note before we completely jump into exactly how we're handling summer camp. One of the first things is that the governor's most recent order, and that being Governor Northam. I'm sure that a lot of you saw the same thing that I did, which was an amendment to a previous order that had been in place, which was the governor's stay-at-home order in the state of Virginia. That was amended, and there was a lot of details in there. But the most exciting one for all of us was that we can officially and legally offer summer camp as of May 1, which is good because we start much later than that. So we're really excited about it, and that was big news. And you know, I texted and called Sarah immediately. I probably called a bunch of other people to tell them how excited I was. But I think a lot of us kind of had that experience of it being kind of a bummer last year in that we couldn't offer summer camp, and we are thrilled to be able to do that now. So that does not come with no stipulations and no details that are going to need to be reviewed as we move forward with that. So what I ask is that we all keep flexible and we keep maintaining true flexibility. This is going to be a bit of a moving target. We're going to have to continue to compensate. One of the things that came out there was that the governor put in a mandate on the usage of cohorts, which is good. That's something that's going to be a bit unfamiliar in some of our settings at camp, kind of needing that need to stay with the same group of people all day long. So please do continue to keep all of the fantastic flexibility that you all have had throughout this entire process in mind, and continue to know that as future orders, as future amendments come out, we will change our program and we will change the details of what we're doing to adjust our system to match that, so that we can continue to offer that fun, safe camping experience. Okay. Summer camp protocols. When we sat down to put all of this together, there was a course of what seemed like interminable meetings, and I can say they were interminable meetings because I was the one running them, where we sat down with some of our key leaders, some of our key volunteers, our camp directors, so on and so forth, and we put together a ton of things and protocols in place on how we would operate this summer. That was done using both the CDC's guidelines for operating summer camp, as well as what works at our properties, Goshen and Snyder, and developed with the leadership of all of those teams. So what we came up with was the easiest way to look at this was to group these into 4 basic categories. And that's what they are. And I'm sure some of you have seen the document that we posted online already. We've got check-in, we've got program, we've got food service, and we've got facilities / wildcards. Miscellaneous is what we were referring to it as. So those are all things that one or more of obviously there's going to be some overlap there, but those were all things that one or more of our protocols fell within. So I'm going to touch on each of those in that order. And the final point that I'll make here as a prerequisite is we do, and we will continue to need your help out there, whether you're just a parent or a unit leader or even a youth coming to summer camp. We need your help to identify these moving targets as we move forward. If there are things that you feel like we potentially have gotten too tight on or too strict on, please let us know that. If you think there are areas in summer camp where we may not have gone far enough with our protocols, please, we do need to know about that. If there are things that you feel like we have just simply missed, we would like to know about that as well. So please do continue to help us and continue to add things to that. Email myself, email Sarah. You can also call us as well. Okay. So getting to the first point of check-in. Okay. As far as med checks go, that's going to be done very similar to how it was done in the past. So you're going to have one unit will come at a time, one group, one cohort, and we're going to check you in and we're going to ask you a few questions just about your medical history and about what medications you're going to be holding onto at camp. One-on-one, that there will be private screenings, one-on-one, so that's not going to be done as a group, of course. But one of the bigger changes here is we're obviously going to be looking at your temperature. We're going to have some thermometers out there. We're going to be taking everyone's temperature upon arrival, as well as we're going to be asking you some questions that are going to gauge if you are experiencing any symptoms from COVID-19. A lot of people have said, well, what does that mean? What are the symptoms of COVID-19? As far as that goes, we're going to use exactly what is on the CDC's guidance and website when it comes to that. So I think where we are right now, we're looking at a cough, we're looking at congestion, we're looking at fever, chills, fever being defined as anything over 100.4, okay? If the CDC, we're looking at loss of taste, loss of smell, those big target symptoms that are associated with COVID. If the CDC removes any of those by the time we get to summer camp, then we will, of course, remove those accordingly. But those are going to be the symptoms that we're looking for when it comes to these things. Okay? So we are going to take your temperature. A lot of people, this has been a big question, is what happens if one of those things is not checking out? So there's going to be one and one only quarantine opportunity. So what we're going to do is if you are experiencing any of those symptoms, if you have a fever, we're going to pull you aside. We're going to have an area set up so that you can quarantine for a little bit. Okay. Here's the kicker. I know that this is going to be a tough one, a tough pill to swallow. After 30 minutes, if there is no resolution, we're going to have to make arrangements to send you home from camp. Okay. We simply cannot have you at summer camp if you are sick. It's putting you at risk, it's putting us at risk, it's putting our participants at risk, and it's putting our program in jeopardy. So after 30 minutes, if those symptoms have not completely resolved, we're going to be making arrangements to send you home. Why the 30 minutes in there? Because I know that there are times when somebody might just be hot. It might just be hot outside, and obviously you're going to be recording a higher temperature if it's hot, or you might just be experiencing shortness of breath because you jogged up to wherever you were, something like that. So we do want to give you just a chance to kind of calm those symptoms down. But if they haven't resolved themselves, then we're going to have to send you home. The big thing to note here: if you are sick, do not come to camp. Please, please, please. If you are sick, do not come to summer camp this year. That goes for youth and that goes for adults. And that seems so obvious at the point that we're at, but there have been times that people have been so desperate to do these things that they are showing up to them with a lot of these symptoms. And we have had protocols in place for events in the past where we've had to send people home because they simply weren't fit to be at that event. Okay, so if you are sick, Do not come to camp, please. All right, so jump right over to our next. That was the big part of check-in. Program. Big questions about masks. A lot of people have said, well, what's going to be the deal with masks? Are we done wearing masks when it comes to summer camp? And the answer is a short no. Unfortunately not. I know that a lot of us are itching to rip those masks off. We will still be needing to wear masks to a certain extent and to a certain fairly large extent as it relates to summer camp this year. Masks will be worn whenever you are inside of a program area. The obvious exception to that is going to be aquatics. Obviously, we don't want you wearing your mask while you're in the water for fairly obvious reasons, but we do want to enforce that when you are in a program area, when you are in a building, when you're in a trading post, anything like that, when you're in the wood shop at Camp Snyder, or when you're in the technology center at Camp Olmsted, we are all, the staff and the participants and the adults are going to need to wear masks, okay? We are going to be putting some caps on our merit badges and activity sessions. Merit badge registration for Goshen has not opened yet, and also for the specialty week at Camp William B. Snyder has not opened yet, but we are going to need to put some caps in place for that. So we'll let you know as far as what those are when those are determined. But that's something to be mindful of as you have youth that are signing up for these merit badges, that are signing up for these activities, that they might need to have a backup plan in case that merit badge or that activity has already filled up because we needed a smaller cap. Okay. This was one that we were looking at our camps and the way they're situated, and this was one that came up in that a lot of our camps we rely on the outdoors of seating, if you will. So a lot of people will sit on rocks in program areas, or they'll sit on picnic tables, or they'll sit on a log, or so on and so forth. What we're going to do is we're not going to be able to have 10 people sitting adjacent to each other on a log in these program areas. So we're going to encourage people to bring your own little chair, your own little folding stool. If you're somebody that's not quite as comfortable sitting in the dirt or sitting in the grass as I am a lot of the time, we're encouraging you to please do bring your own chair, your own folding stool that you can bring around to your program areas as you go about your day. Okay. Campfires and flag ceremonies. These were identified after the discussion on food service. These were identified as our two biggest, what we were referring to as choke points, right? Campfires and flag ceremonies. So this is what we came up with. We're going to conduct them, but we're going to conduct them in separate areas at the same time, okay? So at no point are we going to have the full camp in that same area at that same time for that activity. There was talk of essentially this being the year that we didn't have these as part of camp. We didn't have campfires and we didn't have flag ceremonies. But we did decide that that was a bit of a bridge too far, and that we do want to be able to offer these opportunities, but we want to make sure that we are offering them safely. Okay, so they're going to be conducted in separate areas at the same time. Obviously, we're going to be spreading out people, and you're going to be sitting, with your cohort, with your group. But this will be one of the few times that you're going to be in the same area as other campers. Okay, that does not necessarily mean, in fact, it does not unnecessarily mean that you will be interacting with other campers. Okay, so you're going to be in the same area, but you're not going to be interacting with them. You'll still be interacting primarily with your own cohort or group. Okay, but we are going to offer these. Same thing goes with flag ceremonies. A lot of these will be taken care of because they occur before meals. So we'll talk about food service in a second here. But if you're at one of our camps that doesn't have flag ceremonies before meals, those flag ceremonies will be happening at a different location at the same time. Remember, half and half. Okay. Attendance is optional, and that goes for really anything that we have. Obviously, if you want to earn a merit badge, you're going to have to do all of the requirements associated with it. But attendance for these activities is absolutely optional. If you are someone who does not feel comfortable coming to a campfire or coming to a flag ceremony, we will not force you to do so. You will have the option to stay in your campsite during that. So I can't stress that enough. If you're someone who is just not interested in that activity, feel free to opt out. Songs and cheers are going to be very minimal, and we'll touch on this in some other areas as well. We are not going to be able, again, this is one of those flexibility things, and I think this is going to be challenging for some, but we're not going to be able to all scream at the same time as much as we love screaming at each other. We're not going to be able to all scream at each other at the same time as much as we would have in the past in scouting activities. So we might just have a staff member or two leading a song, leading a cheer, but we're not going to have the whole audience screaming at each other because we just don't want that aerosol spread there. Okay. Same thing with cheers. One of the options that we've explored is doing some kind of more silent cheers, something you can do with your hands without everybody screaming. But that's something that is going to be a bit limited at these activities. Okay. That's program. Food service. Patrol cooking and heater stack. For those of you that are going to Marriott or Bowman, those are not things that are going to change much, if at all, other than the obvious, the people that are preparing those kinds of things will have masks on as they're doing it, and people will likely be required to wear masks when they come and pick up the food and so on and so forth, whenever you're handling food for that matter. But the formula to this, and I know that some of you on here watching this are probably not as familiar with these things, but the formula to this is you pick up your food and you bring it back to your campsite. So these are activities that were already pretty pandemic friendly before we began all of this. But as far as the big question that I'm sure a lot of you have is at the dining hall camp. So that being Snyder, that being, if any of you are here to be a part of Camp Airy, if you are going to one of the Weeblos camps at Goshen, PMI or Ross, or if you're going to Camp Olmsted, all of those have a dining hall. Okay. We're going to have breakfast and dinner served in 2 different shifts. Some of you who have been around for a little bit may remember that we did do this at one point at Camp Olmsted many moons ago. So we're going to be going back to that model for this one summer. I know that it's going to be a little bit tough as it relates to breakfast. I know that some of us are earlier risers and some of us are not so early risers like myself. But this is something that's going to be necessary. Again, I return to my point on flexibility. Okay, so that you'll see that reflection in the schedules when you go to look at kind of the camp that you're going to in that schedule. But one meal is going to be a little bit earlier than the other meal to accommodate about half the camp going to eat at the same time. Okay. No more than 5 at a table. I know that number has been tossed around by the CDC and others. That number, I believe, is actually 6 at this point as it relates to the CDC. But we feel that 5 is the proper number for the size of tables that we have at our camp. So we're not going to be putting more than 5 at a table. Lunch is going to be open. That has already been in place. I know at least the 2 Weeblos camps at Goshen and Camp Olmsted. But that's going to be in place at all of our dining hall camps. You are going to have the ability to show up, grab your lunch. It can be a cold lunch, and you can take your cohort and eat it wherever you'd like. Okay, so we're not going to have everybody in there together at one time for lunch. And it's similar to what we have, like I said, what we have been doing, and that has not changed a whole lot. Disposable dishware. That is something that we are going to be utilizing all summer long at these dining hall camps. We are not going to be using your classic plates, forks, knives, so that we don't have to run that dishwasher and run that risk of those things getting into cross-contamination, if you will. Again, we're going to be very, very minimal on songs or cheers. You might have a staff member that sings one on their own, but we're not going to have the typical everybody stand up, everybody scream lots of aerosols in there. And then everything that you would expect as far as fans and doors and anything that we can do to continue to move ventilation around. So all of those doors are going to be open, pending weather availability and so on and so forth. And unless it's freezing cold or something like that, we're going to have a lot of fans going and just make sure that everybody is being ventilated and kept safe. Okay. And then finally, I bring us to the fourth category, which is the facilities or wild card category that I mentioned at the beginning here. So again, I go back to masks. Those are not just for program areas, but really worn whenever you are within 6 feet of someone. So that's something to keep in mind as you're, whether you're sitting at a picnic table or just, standing around in a circle or something like that. Just, we're going to continue to watch our distance. We're going to continue to socially distance and do the things that we know help in all of these situations. So please do be mindful of that with your youth, with your adults, so on and so forth. If you are within 6 feet of someone, we do ask that you have a mask on. Same thing goes to, again, even outside of our program areas, even if you're talking about the trading post or something like that, that is an area where we want people to be masked up. Okay. And then again, the obvious exception being in the water at aquatics. Okay, there's going to be some wiggle room there. Thermometers provided to all units. That is what we're planning on for this year. As far as the Camp Snyder goes, I think the staff will keep those on hand rather than the units themselves. But in Goshen, we're going to be able to give every unit a thermometer. Obviously, you are welcome to bring your own, but what we're going to be asking is that after that med check that I referenced earlier, each day on a daily basis, we want you to please be, as the unit leader, taking control and taking temperatures on each of your participants at the beginning of the day. Again, I know that this has caused some people some headache and some heartache over time. Me personally, I happen to serve as a volunteer EMT, and each time I go in, still to this day, we take everyone's temperatures on the way in. So this is something that we're going to ask that you do. We haven't completely formulated the system of reporting that, but what it'll likely be is part of your site inspection will just be a sheet on your latrine that the unit leader signs and says, I did a health check-in with each of my youth and each of my adults in my unit this morning. Okay, we want you to do that at the beginning of every day. If there are any symptoms, again, we ask that you come down to our first aid room or our health lodge. We quarantine you for a little bit, and if you're not getting better in 30 minutes, you're unfortunately going to have to go home. Okay. We really want you to be as vigilant as you possibly can. We do not want any challenges related. Well, there are going to be challenges related with this, but what we really don't want is any kind of COVID outbreak. I can't stress that enough. So please don't hesitate if there are questions or if there are concerns, but please do be very vigilant over the people that are attending camp with your unit. Okay. Sanitization. A lot of people have asked about this. So what we are going to do in between sessions is we are going to take our staff and we're going to go around and we're going to sanitize tents, we're going to sanitize cots, and we're going to sanitize any frequently touched surfaces. That's between any new group. So if you're in camp for a week with your troop, or you're in camp for a week with your Weeblos pack, you may not see us doing that during that week, but in between your stays, we are going to send the staff in to sanitize those frequently touched areas. Okay. Showers also, we're going to be cleaning those daily. I think a lot of camps have already implemented a system behind this, but we might have a cohort volunteer to help us clean those and have staff kind of supervising as that happens. But those are going to be cleaned on a daily basis. And then tenting arrangements. This is probably the biggest question that I've gotten over time. Are you going to be sleeping one to a tent? The short answer is we simply don't have the tent space and availability and inventory to have one person to every tent. On top of the fact that I think many would agree that at the Cub Scout age level, that might be a little bit young to have your own tent. So I'm going to put this out there now and say 2 youth or 2 adults will be sharing a tent, and per the CDC guidelines, and potentially 3 at Snyder, those tents are a little bit bigger. Per our CDC guidelines, they're going to sleep head to toe. And that is straight out of the CDC guidelines on safe operation of summer camps. Okay. The caveat to that is if you would like, you are welcome to bring your own tent. Okay. If you're an adult or if you're a youth that wants to tent alone and your parent is okay with that and so on and so forth, you are welcome to bring your own tent to camp. We do not have a problem with that. But we do not have the inventory to have a tent available for every single person that's coming to summer camp. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Finally, now that we've gotten through all of the 4 categories, I do want to highlight some unknowns, and this goes back to kind of the moving target that we have. Vaccines. This has been a big question. What's the deal with vaccines? Do we have to be vaccinated? This is still an unknown until these vaccines are easily accessible. So my answer to that is no. You do not have to be vaccinated to come to summer camp. Still an unknown until these vaccines are definitively easily accessible to the public. If that target changes, we will let you know. But for right now, you do not need to be vaccinated to attend summer camp. Vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine, that is. Okay. Goshen bus. This is, for those of you that are Goshen people, we do run a bus service down to Goshen. We don't know yet if this is going to be an offering. We have reached out to the company and we have chatted a little bit with them about the possibility of offering buses and how others are doing it and the safety of it and the efficacy of certain practices. We are just not completely there yet where we're ready to commit to having that bus service available. But we will let you know when that changes. That applies, I will say that applies a lot of which to those of you that typically go to Camp Bowman. But there are a few others from scattered amongst the Weeblos camps, Olmsted, Marriott, who utilize this bus service as well. So we will let you know if that changes. Okay. I talked about this at the beginning. I touched on it. I want to touch on it again. The Virginia cohort requirement, and that came out as part of the amendment that Governor Northam put out, is that we are going to need to utilize this model to operate summer camp. The good news is that we have already been utilizing a very, very similar model when it comes to our high adventure camp at Lynhoxton High Adventure, and in a few webinar series later, we'll talk about that, and our Cubs and our Weeblos camps. The bad news is that this makes it a little bit more difficult to implement merit badge classes. So we are going to have to adjust that system to match the governor's requirement. And we are going to be pushing back the beginning of merit badge registration while we solidify exactly what we're doing and how that is going to work. But again, as long as we're all a little bit flexible on what merit badges our youth need and making sure that they have their backup options, we should be able to accommodate most of what our youth want out of their summer camp experience. But it is something to remember that cohort requirement is the governor put it out there as cohorts of about 25 or less. So you are supposed to be roaming around camp and doing all of your programs with the same group of people all day, right? So it's not the same requirement as we used to have, where we could basically say, we'll have 1 youth from this troop and 1 youth from this troop and 1 youth from this troop, up to 50 youth in 1 merit badge class. That's just not going to be an offering that we're able to provide. Please do make sure that we maintain our flexibility, and we will let you know as soon as we have the system in place, whatever that ends up being. Okay. Ooh, sorry about that. All right. There we go. A couple of resources that I want to share with you. You can see on the screen, we've got the Goshen COVID protocols. Right below, we've got the Snyder COVID protocols. They're going to look very similar, but we did adapt each of that set to match the property that it was on. Okay. Also, the CDC summer camp guidance. That is online there, and we will be following that as it changes in case it does change. But that was a document that was developed a little while ago, as well as the Virginia Governor's Order. So if you need any of these things, you are reading the same script that we are reading with as we make these protocols at home. Okay, so if you want to look through any of those, feel free to do so. We will continue to have those available online, and we will continue to update those Goshen and Snyder protocols in that same spot. So that's the one place that you go, the one-stop shop, if you will, to find any of the things that you need to find as far as how we're operating at summer camp in COVID. Okay. At this point, that is all that I have completely prepared. I am going to open the floor a bit. I know that you are not able to unmute yourselves, but I'm gonna go through some of the questions and answers. Actually, I'm gonna ask Sarah if you don't mind unmuting and just kind of picking out the question as they come up that you have not already answered, and just throwing that at me. I will go ahead and try to field those as best as I can.
Sure, let me grab one. We had a couple questions about capacity at camp.
Good question. Yes, absolutely. What we decided when we started was that we are going to limit the traditional capacities of our camp to 75% of what they typically are. So some of those camps have filled up during certain weeks a little bit faster than they typically would, and that's because we are going to be operating at a 75% capacity of what is normal. Good question.
Sorry, there's a lot of questions here.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I felt it might be easier if I coordinated with you.
There are a handful of questions about negative COVID tests during check-in.
Another very good question, and one that we have been getting frequently. The short answer to that is no. We will not be requiring a negative COVID test upon entry. And there was a good amount of thought that went into that decision, but that was the decision that was made, that we will not be offering a negative test within any certain time frame upon entry to camp.
All right, next question regarding transportation. Recommendations for transportation, carpooling, not carpooling. Will there be testing if the Goshen bus is running, or like with thermometers and such like that?
Yeah, so again, on the testing, we are not requiring a negative test. As far as carpooling goes, I would absolutely advocate and encourage anyone that is thinking about carpooling to do so within your cohort that is coming to camp. So for example, if 2 youth are going to be sharing a tent for that week, those would be the obvious choice for 2 youth to carpool with parents together. And on top of that, I would also say that you should continue to follow all of the things, do all of the things, if you will, to keep ourselves safe during that journey. So if you are carpooling, I would encourage you to mask up while carpooling. If you can, I would encourage you to have windows open while you're doing that. And essentially following every principle that you can to make that available. But I'm going to say that it is okay to carpool. It is probably not the most ideal, but it is not an impossible thing to
do. Questions about cohorts and program.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I touched on there at the end. I want to go back to, there's going to be a little bit of flexibility needed for merit badge classes, as we're not going to be able to combine youth from different troops into merit badge classes. As it relates, though, to club programming or Weeblos programming, there is not going to be a ton of change. It's the same sort of concept that you would be dealing with on a normal basis, where you're going to travel the camp with your den or with your pack during the week, and you're going to be stopping at different program areas. You're not going to be doing that with other cohorts, right? We're gonna have one cohort at a time at those program areas. So a little bit of flexibility in the merit badge program, and just a little bit of patience while we get that figured out and how we're going to do that. But as far as cub programming, not huge changes in the way that we offer that.
Can a parent tent with their scout?
So the short answer to that is yes, if you are in Cub Scouts. That is no longer allowed at the Scouts BSA level, and that is straight out of the Guide to Safe Scouting. Good question.
Will the camp staff be vaccinated?
Another very good question. We are, at this point, we are going to heavily encourage our camp staff to be vaccinated, pending availability of those vaccinations. But we are not going to be requiring them to do so, okay? So we are going to absolutely be encouraging them to do so. And in fact, it just recently came out that they were going to be considered part of the next phase of vaccination, and that specifically being summer camp staff. So we're gonna have to figure out how that is working. So we are going to certainly make that opportunity available and absolutely encourage it for camp staff, but it is not going to be a requirement to be on camp staff.
Can you speak to the refund policy on if someone gets sick before they come to camp?
Great question. Another great question. So we adjusted our refund policy, kind of predicting that this might happen this year. So here's our refund policy. If for any reason, if for any reason you need to request a refund, we will grant you an 85% refund if you do not show up to summer camp, all the way through July 31st. What does that mean? That is all the way through the time in which anybody would be coming to summer camp, okay? So even if you get sick that one day before you're about to get on the bus, we will, or get in the car, as the case may be, we will, and you can't come to camp, we will absolutely give you an 85% refund. We are going to keep a small handling fee on our end, but we will give you an 85% refund. No questions asked. It doesn't matter what the reason, up to July 31st. After July 31st, we will no longer be doing refunds, okay? So we extended that a little bit. We used to have about a June 15th-ish deadline for that sort of thing, because that was the point at which we had kind of planned on you coming to summer camp, and it still is, for that matter, but we've gotten a little bit more flexible to accommodate for the changing circumstances that we have. So that's the policy on refunds. The other caveat to that policy is if, and again, I do not foresee that happening, especially with the futuristic nature of the governor's announcement, but if we have to close summer camp, if we are legally forced to close summer camp, you will get everybody who was signed up will get a full 100% refund. So that's a really good question. Thank you.
If a participant doesn't pass the COVID symptoms daily check, what about all those they may have been in contact with, like their unit?
Very good question. What we're going to do is we're going to ask who they have been in contact with, and we're going to collect that list. We are then going to monitor that list for any symptoms that are beginning. At that point, anybody who would like to excuse themselves from summer camp is going to be given the option to do so with a full refund. And we're going to continue to monitor that situation and let it play out. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I do not think that we are going to immediately send home everyone who may have had contact with them. But I do want to double check on that. So let me double check on that, and I will circle back with our summer camp audience as time goes on. That's a really good question.
Can you speak more towards how a cohort might work for merit badges?
Yes. Let me just finish making this note here. What we're looking at right now, as far as putting that system together, is a system by which instead of an individual youth signing up for merit badges, we would have a patrol sized group sign up for that merit badge. So for example, swimming A may not be made up of the same 50 kids that it was before. It may be made up of 7 to 10 youth that form the Firehawks patrol of Troop 123. And they, as a group, sign up for swimming A. Same thing with any other merit badge. That would then be a patrol signing up as opposed to individual youth signing up on their own for that sort of thing. We are certainly going to make the most possible badges available for the most possible amount of cohorts, but we are going to be adhering to a model very similar to that.
Will you administer COVID tests to those showing symptoms?
That's actually a very good question, and the simple answer to that is I am working with a local hospital as well as a group of volunteers to gain the ability to do that if we need to do that. I cannot guarantee it yet that we'll be able to just take out a COVID test and immediately administer that and get it to the lab and rapid test and all that kind of stuff. I am hopeful that we will be able to, and we'll get a set of rapid tests that we can then use to make those tests, to get the results of those tests in a timely fashion. Or at that point, we'll have tests that are basically take-home tests that anybody could gain at a CVS or something. So we'll have the ability to basically get that person tested in a timely fashion. We just simply can't say for sure that we're going to be able to do that right now, but it is being worked, I should say.
What's the minimum size for a Webelos unit?
Minimum size for a Webelos unit. We do not have a minimum size. In the past, we have been able to come with simply one parent and one youth can come to camp as a Webelos unit. So we do not have a minimum size, and we actually haven't had a maximum size in the past. But as far as one cohort goes, per the governor's order, that cohort is going to have to be 25. That is in any given group at the same
time. Will equipment be sanitized between scouts? So things like BB guns, archery, things like that.
Yes, the answer is yes, and that's a really good question that I probably should have added to the program section. But yes, in between groups that are touching BB guns or touching rifles or anything like that, we are absolutely going to sanitize those highly touched things. That goes for PFDs, that goes for guns, that goes for crafts at the handicraft areas, that goes for bows and arrows, so on and so forth. Yes, we absolutely will be doing that. Great question.
We have a number of questions about how Trails Head, New Scout Quest, Bowman Brigade, the first year programs will work with the cohort model.
Yeah, that is something that at this point I don't have a clear answer on. I am going to defer that question to our Scouts BSA webinar, which is next week, and I'm gonna get some more information and gather that. So please stay tuned. Let me gather some things together, and we will be right back with you.
Along that line, the cohort model for smaller troops, for a group that might have a diverse range of ages and interests.
Ah, I see. Yeah, so if you have a smaller troop, but different age levels within that troop. I think it's going to be very difficult. I think that troop is going to have to serve as one cohort, because really the only other alternative is that they're going to be you would have to split up and go around to program areas on your own, and that's just not an alternative per the governor's order. So I think that group, I know that they may they may have those differing interests, but I think they need to stay together as one cohort for this year. And this is all, of course, if that order changes, we will adapt accordingly.
Will a recording of this presentation be available afterwards?
Yes, it absolutely will be. We are recording this right now, and it will be on our website for your use.
How often will facilities like bathrooms and showers be sanitized?
Showers will be sanitized every single day. Same. There's only four flush toilet bathrooms on each of the shower houses at Goshen, and the shower houses at Snyder. There's a lot more on that area there, but each of those things will be sanitized every single day while you're at camp. But the high touch, like your tent or your cot or your platform or something like that, those high touch surfaces will be sanitized only in between groups. So if you're going to Snyder and you're going for a resident weekend in between the next group coming in for day camp, the staff is going to go through and sanitize those areas. But while you're at camp, the shower house is going to be sanitized once a day.
How does the cohort affect larger units?
That's a good question, and one that we haven't completely flushed out yet. Again, the order is less than a week old at this point, so we're gonna have to see. I wasn't expecting the cap to be quite right where it was, so we're gonna have to see how that works. What I will tell you is that as we go through all of these things, you are not going to be placed in a position where you basically can't send half your troop or whatever that number may be to summer camp. We're going to find a way to get them there. It might just mean splitting you all into, say, different campsites or campsites that are a little further away from each other, and then that cohort size being a cohort on their own versus being with that troop the whole week. But we still have to flush that out a little bit.
Can scouts and campers bring their own equipment, like personal flotation devices, bow for archery, BB gun, things of that nature?
Generally, as far as PFDs go, I'm going to say absolutely yes. The waterfront staff is probably going to want to just take a quick look at it, make sure it's approved in every way it needs to be. But the answer is yes, you can absolutely do that, and I would almost go as far as say it's recommended that you do that. As far as bringing individual, I don't want to go as far as to say I want everybody bringing individual firearms to camp, because that gets very tricky very quickly. But as far as, you know, eating utensils or a personal flotation device or something else that we hand out that you might be concerned might have not gotten sanitized as well as it should have, please do. Yes, we would encourage you to bring your own on that front.
And if folks have questions that they think of later or that I've missed in the copious amounts of questions, where should they send those questions?
There's a couple different forums, but the good one to start with is to myself at phil.barbash at scouting.org. So that's phil.barbash@scouting.org. Also, you can send them if they are directly Camp Snyder related. You can send them to camp.snyder@scouting.org. Or if they are related to the particular camp that you might be attending at Goshen, you can go to the contact page for that camp, scroll down, and you will see the camp director's contact information there. So feel free to do that as well. And I won't throw you under the bus, Sarah, but there is also Sarah Moses as a resource for some of your registration questions and so on and so forth. But as the captain of this ship, you can direct your questions to me, and please do as time goes on. We want to make sure that we are touching every single surface. No pun intended, but we're touching every single surface that we can here. If there is something that we can be doing better, we want to do it better. If there's something that you think we're too strict on, we want to take a look at that too. So please do send me your questions, send me your concerns over time, and we can certainly fit that into the model and see where it fits. All right. Sarah, unless there is anything else that you think is pressing, I think I am going to stop here. I am going to, actually, Sarah, do we want to do that poll real quick? I meant to do that at the beginning, but I realized that I jumped ahead of myself. So Sarah is going to prepare a poll on the screen. We'd like to know kind of who is out there in the audience and what type of unit you're representing or planning on bringing to summer camp this year. And obviously we didn't get to all of your questions, and I am sorry about that. But we are going to have 3 more of these webinars. All right, let's see. Sorry, I will finish what I'm saying in just a sec here. Okay, so results are coming in. Looks like a pretty good portion of you, a little over 60%, are here to learn about Scouts BSA and venturing. And then a good amount are the Weeblos, about 30% for the Weeblos camps down at Goshen, which is great. And then the next highest would be the Cub Scout Day Camp, and then Cub Scout Resident Camp, and then Provisional Camp. So that's really good information to know. I just wanted to kind of see what we were dealing with as far as our audience that's out there for these things. At one point, we had what I think I saw as many as 180 people here, which is just absolutely fantastic. So I thank you so much for joining us. We will be here you can register using the same flyer that we put out there. We will be here next week, same time, same place, to talk specifically about Scouts BSA camp. So most of that information is going to be program related. I will have more information at that point on cohorts and that kind of stuff. accepting that I will not be at a complete and full answer, but we'll have more information to give you at that point and talk about how camp is going to work for Scouts BSA units. And then after that, the next week, we'll be talking about Cub Scouts. So I know that there were some of you here for day camp. I know that we didn't touch a whole lot on day camp. So we'll have some Cub Scout representation at that webinar as well. And then the final one for High Adventure. So please do tune in. These are every Thursday in March. And I thank you all for joining us here tonight. And everybody have a lovely evening. And let's get ready for a fantastic experience at summer camp in 2021. We're back in action. Have a good night, everyone.